Yo, what is up, everyone? Welcome back to the space where we actually talk about money without the boring suits or the confusing jargon. I want you to close your eyes for a second and imagine it is late 2020. The world is outside looking like a scene from a disaster movie, and I am sitting on the floor of a tiny apartment with a cold cup of coffee and a bank balance that says exactly $1,000. I had just graduated into the worst job market in a generation, and I had landed this gig at a Fortune 500 company that looked great on LinkedIn but felt like a slow motion soul crush in real life. I remember staring at my computer screen at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, watching a spreadsheet flicker, and realizing that if I didn't show up the next day, that direct deposit would just stop. That realization felt like a physical scar. Man, the absolute terror of knowing I was just a cog in a machine that could replace me in a heartbeat. I was working for a paycheck, but I wasn't building a life. And that $1,000 in my account felt like a joke compared to the mountain of bills and the rising inflation I saw on the news every night. But that was the moment I decided to stop being a spectator in the economy and start being a player, because I realized that the quickest way to start making passive income today is by investing. Oh shit, I know what you are thinking. You rethinking $1,000 isn't enough to change anything, but that is exactly what the big banks want you to believe. So you keep your money in a savings account earning 0.01%. Contrary to popular belief, it doesn't take a ton of money to start building a fortress. It just takes a different lens and a little bit of audacity. Peace and blessings to everyone watching this right now who is tired of the grind, because today I am sharing the 5 ways I used to turn that grind into a money-making machine. Building a passive income stream takes one of two things. It takes time or it takes money, and frankly, the second option is a lot easier once you understand the mechanics. I first started realizing the importance of passive income in my mid-20s when I wanted to leave my job, and I thought, how great would it be if I could just quit but still collect a paycheck? It sounds like a dream, right? Like some magical fantasy. But that is the reality for people who understand how assets work. When you actively earn a paycheck, the moment you stop working, the money stops coming in, and there is just no way around that math. That is why over the last few years, I've been obsessed with building these streams, everything from real estate to index funds to the macro trends of the housing market. I've spent countless hours looking at rent increases, mortgage rates, and the way household debt is climbing, and I realized that if you don't have a shield, the economy will eat you alive. And look, if you ever see an ad where some guy is trying to sell you a secret formula to make $10,000 a month with zero effort, run the other way, because it is a total scam. That is not how life works. You either put in the sweat equity or you put in the capital. And if you have $1,000, you have the capital to start. The first move we are talking about is a REIT, or a real estate investment trust, which is basically the cheat code for owning property without the headache. When you buy a REIT, you become a shareholder of a company that owns massive income, producing real estate, like those giant shopping malls or apartment complexes you see in every city. A REIT is basically a stock, but it's a stock in a company whose entire business is owning and operating real estate. By law, these companies have to pay out 90% of their income to people like you and me in the form of dividends. Think about the power in that. You are getting a cut of the rent from a massive skyscraper or a retail hub without ever having to fix a leaky sink or chase a tenant for rent at 3 a.m. Take a well-known REIT like Simon Property Group, ticker SPG, which owns some of the most iconic retail properties in the US. If you look them up, you'll see a dividend yield of around 5.82%, which means if you drop your $1,000 in, you get about $58 a year deposited to your account. I know, $58 isn't going to buy you a private jet, but it is infinitely better than the $0 most people are making in passive income. I remember getting my first dividend payment back when I was a teenager. It was just a few cents, but that feeling of money appearing in my account while I was sleeping was a religious experience. Once you see it happen, once you make passive income a part of your identity, you stop thinking about spending money and you start thinking about deploying it. You can take that $58 and reinvest it, or buy another share, and suddenly that snowball starts rolling down the mountain. But maybe you want something even safer, something that keeps the tax man away. And that's where municipal bond funds come in. A municipal bond is basically a loan you give to a local government so they can build a new school or a highway or a hospital. The crazy thing about these is that they are generally quite safe because it's a government-backed bond, and most of the time, they are 100% tax-free. If you live in a place like New York or California where the taxes are absolutely brutal, this is a massive win. If your total tax rate is hitting 40%, a 1.73% tax-free yield is actually like earning 2.8% in a taxable account. It's a super safe way to put $17 of tax-free cash in your pocket every year while helping build a bridge or a school. But let us get a bit more aggressive, because the third way to invest that $1,000 is through individual dividend stocks. This is where you can see some serious yield, but you have to be careful not to fall for the high yield trap, like I almost did. Take a company like Macy's, which at one point had a dividend yield of nearly 10%, which sounds incredible on paper. $1,000 becomes $100 of passive income, but if you dig into the macro trends, you see the danger. Macy's was locked into these long-term leases in malls while their revenue was steadily declining, which meant their profit margins were getting crushed. If the company goes under, That 10% dividend doesn't matter because your original $1,000 is gone too. That is why I always look at what the big players are doing, like Warren Buffett, who keeps a massive chunk of his wealth in quality stocks that pay dividends, like Apple. You want companies that have a moat, companies that are so essential to the world that they will keep paying you even if the economy takes a dip. Now, if you don't want to spend your weekends reading balance sheets and checking operating margins, the fourth option is the absolute king of passive income. Index funds. I am a huge advocate for dollar cost averaging into broad market index funds like VO or VTI. The whole point of an index fund is to remove the human error and the stress of picking individual winners and losers. When you buy an index fund, you are buying a tiny slice of the 500 biggest companies in America all at once. Right now, an SP 500 index fund yields about 1.76% in dividends, which puts about $17 in your pocket for every 1,000 you invest. But the real magic isn't just the dividend. It is the long-term growth of the American economy. I have mine set to automatically reinvest. So every time a dividend hits, it buys more shares, which then pay more dividends next quarter. It is a beautiful self-sustaining loop that requires zero effort from me after the initial setup. I love seeing those notifications pop up on my phone while I am out for a walk or hanging with friends, knowing my money is working harder than I am. And finally, the fifth way to use that $1,000 is the one that changed my life the fastest, the Airbnb bedroom hack. This was the $1,000 investment where I actually made my entire principal back in just 30 days. Back when I was in New York living in a 2-bedroom apartment that had this massive living room we never used. My roommate and I had an idea. We spent $980 to have a professional company come in and put up a temporary wall to create a 3rd bedroom. We got some free furniture from a friend, spent the rest on some nice linens, and listed that room on Airbnb. Because we were in a prime location in Brooklyn, the bookings started rolling in immediately, and we cleared that $1,000 cost in the first month. Over the next 2 years, that tiny room made us over $20,000 in passive-ish income. It wasn't 100% passive, but once the system was down, it took maybe an hour a week to manage messages and cleaning. That is the kind of leverage that changes your life, turning a liability like unused space into a cash flowing asset. The world is a wild place right now, and between the housing market affordability crisis and the constant threat of layoffs, you need a shield. You need to know that even if the corporate world decides it doesn't need you anymore, you have these little streams of income flowing in the background. That $1,000 isn't just money. It is the first brick in your fortress of freedom. I want you to stop waiting for the perfect time to invest and start with what you have today, even if it feels small. Invest early, invest often, and have the courage to build the life you actually want to live. Peace out, stay sharp, and I will catch you in the next video. Does this narrative pace and the way I wove in the graduation story and the corporate scar feel like the right flow for your channel?